Welcome to this week's Who the Folk podcast. I'm Lonnie Goldsmith, the editor of TCG Folk. This week I talked to Anthony and Haley Sisler-Neuman, the husband and wife team that are the co-founders of the Graceful Monsters Educational Theater Collective. We talk about each of their theatrical backgrounds, how their program fits into a crowded Twin Cities theater landscape, and how they're adapting and innovating their program in the COVID era on this week's Who the Folk podcast. Anthony and Haley Sisler-Neuman, welcome to this week's Who the Folk podcast. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having us.
This is the very nice. God, you guys are married. You just right on. That was awesome.
It happens more than we wish to admit.
Trust me. I understand. Been there. So this is a very fun, rare married couple Who the Folk podcast edition. And unfortunately, this is just audio. This isn't visual for everybody at home. But if you spent any time at the JCC, the Savas JCC, you have probably met or seen Anthony and Haley. You're both. You've done lots of things at the J, but you are most well known for helping do the youth theater program at the J. So I guess let's start with that. How did you each get into theater? And you've now made a career out of it with the start of the Graceful Monsters Theater Company.
That's true.
Yeah.
So I guess how did theater happen for each of you?
Yeah. Do you want to go
That's
first?
it. Yeah, I will.
Great.
It's a really good question, and like one of the hardest questions to answer. Because I started theater, I would say officially in 7th grade, actually in the at the JCC. Doing my first show there was Charlotte's Web, which actually we were going to do at the J this spring before the pandemic. So that was going to be a fun full circle, but
It'll happen.
There'll be another time.
And that was my first real show. But if I go back a little bit further, I played the ghost in The Ghost of Plymouth Castle in my 4th grade production. And I feel like that was really my moment of oh my gosh, this is so much fun. People are watching me do this thing that I really love to do. And then I just continued with the performing aspects. I ended up majoring in musical theater in college, and there got introduced into the other aspects of theater, like the tech side, and at the same time was joining Anthony at the J, running the program, and putting a lot of the stuff that I was learning at school into this program, and it just fostered my love for teaching it rather than doing it. And I still love performing, but teaching is so fulfilling. Yeah,
That's a great answer.
Thanks, man.
So one of the first things that we started being a theater couple about was my first play was in 4th grade, and I played Sherlock in Sherlock Meets the Phantom. So
we were both title
characters
in both title characters in 4th grade.
In 4th grade, exactly.
Crazy.
Yeah, crazy. We were in 4th grade at very different times, but we love that story as sort of our bit by the theater bug story is pretty similar. And I did youth theater as a young person. I worked at all of the local youth theater companies and fell in love with it, and I was a kid that went and did plays more often than I did school, which meant that I was a lifer sort of from the get-go. And I did a lot of improvisation at Brave New Workshop, Dudley Riggs Brave New Workshop, and it really fed my desire to create theater more than just be in theater that was already there. So I became a playwright just before college and studied creative nonfiction writing in Chicago at Columbia College. And then came home and jumped back into acting right away. And let's see, in 2012,
2012.
I was asked to direct Wizard of Oz at the JCC, and that's where I met Haley. She was a counselor and I was the director. And that was the first show, and we had 17 kids in that show, 17 actors in that show. And at the time, the program was doing one show a year. They just did a summer show, a summer musical. And as soon as Wizard of Oz was over, all of the families said, we have to do another show. And we said, yeah, of course, next summer. They said, no, now. We have to do another show now. And I said, okay, great, let's do another show. So it very quickly became 3 shows a year. Our second show had over 20 kids. The next one had more and more, and it grew until the summer before this last, our last big summer, we had 38 participants
in Newsies.
Which was just a giant. I mean, it had grown over the years, and this was just this giant thing that happened. And for the last couple of years, I said, I think that we need to do our own thing. I think we need to be a company. We have ideas. We need to do a thing. And just in time for COVID,
pandemic, we said, let's do it now.
We launched our company.
I got to tell you, the number of people I've talked to over these last 8+ at this point months who have said, yeah, you know, just the timing worked out that I started this business during quarantine. I mean, that's bad luck.
It is. It sure is. Especially 8 years coming. It was sort of
8 years in the making, and we were like, okay, this summer was supposed to be our first partnership with the J as Graceful Monsters, and it still was, but it was virtual. But it was going to be our first partnership in person. But honestly, I think that things worked out weirdly really well for us, even though we started in a pandemic. It's still been really, really nice to be able to provide theater, even though it's more along like the film side. Since we record before, we have been recording before and then posting it, but it's weirdly worked out. I don't know.
Knock on wood.
That's what I'm like. Like, I don't know if I should be saying this, but like, speaking for both of us, but we felt pretty good. It is a bummer, but also we're working with what we have.
Yeah. And in the interest of full disclosure, my daughter was signed up this summer to be part of the program. It's weird. It feels like many, many summers ago at this point, but it really was just this past summer.
Yeah.
I mean, like 12 years ago? That's how I feel.
It totally feels like that. But she, I know she was really excited and then really disappointed as it all went to pot. But, listen, you do what you got to do right now.
Yeah. Safety is a priority.
Yeah.
So, Haley, one of the things you said that was really interesting to me is sort of the idea, you love performing, but you also love teaching the theater. How does that work, sort of different theatrical muscles, if you will?
Well, performing feeds my inner, like my inner actor, my my need to be someone other than myself. Like my need to explore other stories from like a first person perspective. And teaching, I get to explore those stories, or I get to help others explore stories different other than their own. And really it's because I've had this love for teaching for a really long time, even though my mom is a teacher. And so my dad was like, you don't have to be a teacher, like you can do something other than that. And so I was like, okay, maybe I'll go this other route. And then it all came back together.
Yeah.
And really it's watching the youth grow that is so incredible. And not even just within one performance, but like the youth that have been with us since Wizard of Oz and like since early times, watching them grow and then graduate and go to college and like do other things other than theater. Like, this is not, the point is not to convince them to go into theater. The point is to give them the tools to do whatever they want. And I feel like that's how it's super different, because when I'm performing, I'm like, this is my jam. This is what I love to do. I love being on stage. I love exploring other stories. And then also, like, I love watching these youth grow into whatever human they want to be. Yeah, it's hard to like completely separate them because so much feeds into each one. Like, there are times where I've said something to a youth when I'm like directing something, and then I incorporate it into like when I'm acting in something.
Totally.
And there's this like serious crossover for me. Yeah. I don't know. Yeah. That's
No, I think that's really interesting. No, I do think it's really interesting how you sort of you teach yourself in the process.
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, something clicks for you that you can use while you perform.
And like, I take voice lessons. I still do all of those things, and I use what my professors and my current teachers are teaching me to teach these youth. And so I feel like it's just a like people helping people, like a pattern. I mean, nobody can see my hand, but I make this like wavy move thing.
Yeah.
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 And
Talking
Anthony,
about it just makes me so happy.
No, I can tell. I absolutely can tell. I think it's interesting. You both sort of came to the J. I mean, you both acted, but then you both sort of have different backgrounds that brought you to the J, and then now to Graceful Monsters. And Anthony, you mentioned that you actually went to school for creative writing.
Yeah.
Are you still writing shows? Are you still trying to develop your own work?
I am. For our program, actually have written a couple of shows. Pretty early on, there was a moment where I was sort of I was looking for something new that the kids could do, like a show that didn't exist yet, and I thought, well, okay, I'll just write one. And I did, and it was super fun. And writing a show and then directing it, writing and directing the same show is super fun. So then I was like, oh, I really like directing my own work. I'll just keep doing this. So I think we've done 4 originals. 2 of them I claim as ones that I've written, and the other ones were full adaptations with the cast involved. We did Where the Wild Things Are adaptation, which was probably one of my favorites, where the youth took the original story and truly just rewrote it as how they wanted to tell it. And that was just...
That is wild.
It was
no pun intended.
Wild.
No pun intended.
All the pun intended.
And then we also did an adaptation of Harold and the Purple Crayon, which was the last show we did before the shutdown.
We did Wild Tales also.
Oh, we did. Oh, yeah. Oscar Wilde. We did an adaptation of Oscar Wilde. Okay, so it's more than 4 then, I suppose. And actually, our next show, as we are exploring virtual theater right now, I'm currently writing a radio mystery for our next production, which is my very first radio play.
And that is sort of perfect for this moment.
It
exactly.
is. Yeah. We are very excited to teach sound effects and what it's like to really truly use your voice as a voice actor, because this film thing has been sort of fun, but it doesn't feel as much like live theater, so we want to poke at radio drama and see what that feels like.
Yeah. And I think that will help a lot with like developing characters and using just your voice. And we try to pick shows and create shows that are going to help them grow in some way. This last show that we did was very character focused. It was called The Complaint Department and Lemonade.
Virtual Department and Lemonade.
And there's no the Virtual Complaint Department and Lemonade. And that was so much fun and all about character development and characters. And so this next one is going to be all about voice and sound effects.
So one of the really cool things about the Twin Cities is that there's so much theater, and there's so much really good theater. How does Graceful Monsters sort of fit in that landscape, or how are you trying to create that niche in this landscape as a new company where there a lot out there right now?
Absolutely. That is an excellent question. It's definitely the first question we brought up when we're starting a theater company. One of the sort of the joke in the thriving theater community of the Twin Cities is, if you don't like the other companies, start your own. Right?
There's so many here.
And it happens all the time, whether it's a company starting just for a fringe show, or a youth company popping up in someone's backyard. And truly the main question, and I have met with several mentors from different youth theaters that I grew up in here in the Twin Cities, and said, okay, I want to do this thing. How do I do this? And we talked, and they said, well, what makes you different? And the different is really where we sat. And Graceful Monsters is a process-based program. So the product is important. The show is important. It is wonderful when the show is great, but the process and the learning is really our focus.
That's where it happens.
And so there are other youth companies that do that, but we focus on process. And our other big difference is we have working professionals teaching all of the time. So we are working and teaching. I sit on a board with Uprising Theater. I'm writing for adults, and Haley is acting in other shows around town. Our music director is in a band, and she is a professional musician of, I don't know, years and years.
Yeah.
And our lighting designer is lighting all over. We bring in professionals to then really show these youth that there are lots of jobs in the industry. They aren't just acting.
And then also act as mentors for those who find out that being on stage isn't actually their jam in theater. And maybe they do like the lights and they want to focus on lighting, or they want to focus on costume design or something like that. We've had plenty of youth come through that start off on stage and then move their way to the tech areas, which is so incredibly important in theater and does not get as much credit as it needs to. And then also vice versa, where they've come in and they've been like, no, I want to be backstage. And then 3 years later, they're starring in the show.
They're in a ballet number on stage, right? And there's nothing more empowering than seeing an 11-year-old with a drill, building something and saying no, I think I want to build sets forever.
It's that moment when they say, it's that word, it's that forever. Though I said it's not about them wanting to do theater forever, it's still, wow, we helped them find their thing. We helped them find something that makes them super happy. And we strive to be a place that is safe for youth, a safe place for them to create and be empowered to express themselves. Yeah.
And all youth. I would say that's the other thing that makes us different, is we work with
all youth,
truly anyone. And we are a program that you don't typically audition to work in our shows. It's you sign up and then there is a spot for everyone. And in our 8 years, we've only had a couple hey, wait a second moments, because in general, people sort of say, oh, I get why I have this role. I'm learning because of this thing. Yeah. Yes, they do audition.
Yes, they do. Not to be in the program, but they do audition just to have the experience of auditioning, which I think is a super important part of theater. Anthony has an incredible superpower of casting and placing the youth where they need to be to learn for that show. And though sometimes, like he was saying, they don't necessarily see it immediately, halfway through the process, they're like, oh, I get it. I got you. I got you, Anthony. You're sneaky. You're sneaky, but I got you.
Totally. Yeah.
And it's funny, you mentioned the technical side of it too. And Anthony, you and I had talked about this I guess back in the spring, like
Mhm.
pre-COVID and everything. My daughter's interested in signing up. She wanted no part of being on stage.
Right.
She tried it,
Right.
and then she moved to the tech side and really, really enjoyed that. And it was like, nope,
Mhm.
this is what I want to do. I don't want to be on stage. I want to help with lighting and costumes and direction and that sort of thing. But I don't want to be on stage.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
I think it's great that you have a program that fosters that, because I think people go to the theater and it's so easy to not think about all of the behind the scenes blood, sweat, and tears that it takes to actually put on what you've come to see on stage.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And so to help foster that, because obviously without the people behind the scenes, there is no show to see.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And that you're helping
And
teach that it's huge. It's great.
thank you. It's really something that we are very proud of. We have and right now, in a world where those technicians aren't working, in our virtual theater, we've been sure to mention that those technicians are still important, and they're, though we don't have a stage manager for a virtual production, we always cover, like, hey, what do you think a stage manager would do right now?
Mhm.
Or what do you think this would happen? We've had a couple of sort of assignments of, let's costume design this, that
Yeah.
we aren't necessarily going to put on this costume or create this costume, but what might it look like if we were in a different place?
And I think that's one of the things that I was worried about virtual theater, was not getting enough of the tech aspects. But I think we've figured out a great way. I mean, one of the kids in the last show that we did was like, hey, we got to design our own costumes and our set and our props. Like, we're getting the tech experience. And I was like, thank you so much, because I was super worried.
Yeah, because turning on your dining room table light is not necessarily running a light board.
That is not lighting. I mean, it is
Right.
technically lighting, I suppose.
Yes, exactly.
But
It is
it's
decided. Right.
Yeah. But
Right.
it's
not what they're going for.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right. But it's still learning. Like, there's still a little bit of learning the importance of being lit
Mhm.
on
Yeah.
stage, like having light so that we can see your expressions on stage or on camera.
Yeah. So I'm just so impressed that you guys are able to still figure out a way to do the sort of teaching and theatrical experience even through Zoom, not being able to get together to do this.
Thank you.
That's
It's
kind of
not been
impressive.
easy.
Thank you so much.
It was
I'm sure not.
It's not always really easy. Technical stuff is not great, but once we watched the Sondheim birthday and saw that even Stephen Sondheim couldn't figure out how to get
Well,
Zoom,
yeah.
that it was
even
okay.
those famous theater artists
Mhm.
were like having trouble, or their Wi-Fi was funky. It was like, oh, thank goodness, because that's true about all of us.
Mhm.
Right. Even famous people have their Wi-Fi go down or forget to
Yep.
unmute themselves.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Famous people, they're just like us.
they're just like
exactly.
us.
And truly, though, it's like a little bit of this beauty that we're all doing this at the same time,
Yeah.
and that we're all learning how to like invent theater online at the moment is beautiful.
Yeah.
It's reassuring.
We
Yeah.
did this summer. We had a virtual class with teenagers that was really about an artistic response to the pandemic and what we're doing now as theater folk. And it was we had a long conversation one day about the Renaissance, and how right after the plague there was the Renaissance, and we will get through this. And the resilient. I don't like using resilience for young people, because sometimes it feels like we are expecting them to be resilient.
Mhm.
But they truly had this this understanding that through hard times we create art, and that's sort of how we do it. So it was phenomenal. We had this unbelievable class. We had a couple of teenagers write a play called The Pundemic. That is hysterical and is just an artist's response to the time that we're living in, and giving them a platform to do that, because they are absolutely feeling everything just like we are, right?
Yeah.
Was such a beautiful thing, and sort of processing with young people of, hey, theater is really important for us as people. How can we continue doing this? And truly getting the ideas from them is sort of how we do everything. And especially in this virtual time, having the young people drive has been very helpful.
I got to think that if you give them that level of ownership and that feeling of ownership right off the top, they don't have to buy into your idea because they're driving the ideas.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's their idea. So they really care about it. It's absolutely true.
That's awesome. That's really cool. So how can people find out more about Graceful Monsters? How can they get involved? How can they sign up? How can they find you?
Great question.
Woohoo. Our website is gracefulmonstersetc.com. And then we are also on Facebook as Graceful Monsters, Educational Theater Collective, and on Instagram.
Our Instagram, I would like one of our youth to take over, though, because I'm not quick enough on the Instagram. Yes, please check us out. Our the ETC is Educational Theater Collective, also, etc. So,
so it's good to know, like a half an hour later, that I like butchered the name.
No, not at all.
No, you're good.
Graceful Monsters Educational Theater Collective is the long version.
Yeah.
So, well, I called it Theater Company earlier. So I guess before we jump in, before we wrap this up, what's the difference between a theater company and an educational theater collective? Because that feels like a very intentional choice in naming.
Yeah, it was.
It was a super intentional choice in naming. I'm going to let you take this one because it was yours from the start. Your idea.
Thanks. I think, as somebody who grew up in youth theater in the Twin Cities, there's just a reality that there are cliques, right? In theater, just like there are in high school, just like in middle school, and these young people are already doing that in these places. And so I knew from the beginning I didn't want us to be a theater company because there's an exclusivity there. There's like and almost like a hierarchy there too, and I don't like any of those. The first time I came in to direct a show, my second musical I directed, because I wasn't brave enough the first time, but the second musical, all of the kids who had been there for a while, I gave apprenticeship jobs in the tech world, and they all had smaller roles on stage. And they got very upset. And they said, no, I've been here for years. I'm supposed to keep getting bigger and bigger roles. And I said, listen, that's not how this works, right? So as non-exclusivity, and this is an inclusive program, a collective, we are collecting artists. We are hoping that they get bit by a bug and that they would like to continue theater. We really encourage our artists to work other places. It's very exciting when somebody says, I'm auditioning for stages,
so
or I'm on right or something, and we get very excited, or this show at my school or something, and we want to help them and not necessarily keep them. So
we want to keep them.
We want to keep them.
We keep them, but we don't want to keep them.
Yeah,
right.
So we're a collective, and the educational part is really that we are process driven, and that somebody is always learning something, and that's the directors, that's the lighting designer, that's the young people acting, that's everyone, and hopefully the audience. We end every show with a post-show discussion, which some families are probably sick of me doing that, but I stand by that. It is that's where that ownership comes in. That's where the young people can truly have that pride in their work. So that's why Educational Theater Collective. Thanks for asking. That's
my pleasure. Thank you for correcting me a half hour later on the proper name of the theater.
Well, I thought it would be a good closer.
That's perfect. That is perfect. However, I can't close on that. We have the last two questions we always close with.
Oh, right.
Which are, what is your favorite Jewish holiday?
Okay.
This just changed for you.
This just changed for me, so I'm really excited to answer this question. If you had asked me prior to like the Jewish New Year and all that stuff, I probably would have said like Hanukkah because I like latkes. But like right now, my answer is Yom Kippur. And that has been my absolute least favorite holy day, since I was little. And then since I started fasting, since I had my bat mitzvah, I have always thought like, oh, that's the day that we don't eat. Great. Woohoo. So fun. But this year, because I didn't get the chance to go to synagogue in person, I was able to watch via Zoom and at the same time, like, do yoga. Like, I was able to do both at the same time. And so I was actually introduced to like the reason that Yom Kippur is the way it is, and all of the like spiritualness of it. And so that is my answer now, because I just fell in love with the idea and the spirituality of Yom Kippur.
That's awesome.
Yeah. I think so too.
It's
really cool.
It's very cool. Simchat Torah is my favorite because I love to dance. And that I like to dance around and celebrate. That's why it's my
I gotta tell you, Simchat Torah is way off the board. I'm not actually like, maybe 2 other people have given me that answer before. Maybe.
Well, and
that's amazing.
Thank you. I think that it's truly the music and dancing around that I love the most about it. So
sure. And then finally, what is your favorite Jewish food?
Oof.
Oh man.
Like all of that.
Okay.
Except like gefilte fish.
You don't like kugel. I love kugel.
You love kugel. I do not love kugel. Is that your answer? Kugel.
It might be.
Ugh.
Matzo ball soup also. I don't know. I just like all of it. I like food.
Food is good.
Food is so good.
I'm gonna say.
Which is why I didn't like Yom Kippur originally.
I'm gonna say knish.
Ooh.
Because I love a good one. It's gotta be a real good one.
I know.
That's my answer.
Those are great answers. Listen, you know,
it's a really hard question.
I have perfected my challah over the
challah
pandemic, though, so I do feel really proud of my challah recipe for COVID.
Yeah.
I bake our challah too, and I didn't this past Shabbat, and I just didn't have time. I picked one up at the store, and it was so sad.
Yeah.
It's just not the same.
Mm-hmm.
Not the same. Well, Anthony and Haley Sisler-Neuman, thank you both so much for joining us. It is always great to see you guys at the J. Hopefully one of these days, very soon, knock on wood, we will be able to do so again. But thank you very much, and best of luck with Graceful Monsters Educational Theater Collective.
Thank you. Thanks
so much for having us.
The Who the Folk podcast is part of the Jew Folk Podcast Network, a product of Jew Folk Inc. Please subscribe, rate, and review the show wherever you get your podcasts. If you have suggestions for other podcast guests, please email them to me at editor@tcjewfolk.com. For our other shows, check out tcjewfolk.com/podcast.